not touching anything. Good afternoon, and thank you for coming. As you know, we have two grad presentations today. They are fiction, and they will, Mel Anderson and Michel Lowenthal, and they will be introducing each other. And so I just wanted to say thank you for coming, and let's get this show on the road.
Okay. Michel Lowenthal was born in South Africa and traveled around the world before landing in Portland. They are a clinical supervisor and therapist, and all of their work is inspired by social justice. Michel plans to complete a book about family, apartheid, South Africa, and trauma. All of which are pretty awesome.
Thanks, Mel. Do you want this? I need my glasses. Okay. Hi, everyone. Hi. Aww. Okay, my thesis is titled On Belief, Our Beliefs as Writers, Humans, and How That Impacts Our Worldview and Our Writing. I forgot to time myself, so I'll quickly just do that. Okay. Which is a bit of a mouthful, my title. So basically it's about belief. Before I dive into the topic, I have some wonderful people to thank. I want to thank friends and chosen family for encouraging me to write and to attend grad school. Thank you, Shirley. And Jennifer, I don't tell you somewhere. My glasses don't do long distance stuff. So. Rebecca and other MFA staff and volunteers for making this program doable for me. I work full-time with 2 difficult jobs, and your flexibility and understanding allowed me to complete the MFA straight up. Yeah. I'd also like to thank my thesis committee. Where's Nicole? Nicole Barney and Dami Shoemaker and Kelly Wells. Thank you. And I'd also like to thank all the instructors I worked with during workshops. Some of them aren't here, but Chris Abani, hey Chris, and Claire Davis, and Garth Greenwell, Frank Gaspar, Molly Glass, Mary Helen Stefania, did I say that correctly? Yeah, okay. And Kelly Wells. Quite a few of you were also my semester advisors as well. So Chris and Garth and Kelly, and as well as Laura Henry. Thank you for being so down to earth, present, and really, really helpful. I so appreciate it. So context for my talk is important. As Mel mentioned, I am South African, and I say it really quick, South Africa, because I'm a little embarrassed, right? It's true. And the country of my origin informs this presentation. However, general context is important too. Kind of like what Claire was saying, the landscape of the story needs to be present. And so today we are in Seaside, Oregon. So let us recognize that this is occupied stolen land. I had to research which First Nation tribes call this land home. It took me a while, maybe because I'm a foreigner, you know, but I wish this information was common knowledge. So I might mispronounce them, sorry. So this is the land of the Chinook, Nehalem, and the Tillamook Silets, and Clatsop. So we're in Clatsop County, right? So let's remember where we stand and how we got here. How the belief in manifest destiny by white pioneers led to an unjust land grab. Yeah? I'm not going into the discussion about genocide, but I know you know that part. Where we live and how we see ourselves in that context informs our beliefs. So I was born in South Africa in the 1970s to a liberal, it seems weird, like it's a part of South Africa, but a liberal Jewish white family. Apartheid technically ended with the first free elections in 1994. So I spent my entire childhood and my young adulthood swimming in the polluted waters of apartheid. My paternal grandparents were German Jews, and they escaped Nazi Germany. Many of their family didn't. And my grandmother was leaving in the last year, leaving in the last years the Jews were allowed to leave in 1938. My maternal great-grandparent escaped the pogroms in Lithuania, Cossacks killed the Jews in shtetls. So shtetls are small Jewish villages. It's all very light stuff we're talking about today, right? So I had seen or heard about the consequences of hate and othering, both in my family's history, but also in the privilege I received as a white person in South Africa. I often wondered how we got there, and here in America. What leads people to do monstrous things? I try to write about South Africa, but it's so big and daunting. Chris was my first workshop instructor and then advisor. I don't know why I always have to wait. He recommended that I reflect on the family. As he said, the terror of the state is mirrored in the terror of the family, which is quite true. He suggested, after reading some of my writing for workshop, to also try not to make an apartheid alphabet, unpacking a litany of atrocities, which I thought was funny and sad at the same time, right? So I think I got it, to infer not to be heavy-handed, so that maybe the story of apartheid would weave through but not be front and center, right? I needed as much help as I could get, so when I chose an essay topic, I decided to focus on James Baldwin's Giovanni's Room. So thank you, Chris, for talking about it in your craft talk, just covering some of the plot. But he did also write about internalized homophobia in such a fearless way. But I will summarize the plot again. The plot, and now I'm worried, is it the plot? Maybe it's the story, I don't know, it's the plot. Yeah, the plot of Giovanni's Room is relatively simple. This is a spoiler alert for a 1955 novel, so if you haven't read it, I'm sorry. The book starts with David, a white American, reflecting on his life, including his childhood and his first homosexual encounter as an adolescent. Unable to accept that he's attracted to men, he leaves for France, where he meets Hella, a white woman. They start dating, and he asks her to marry him. While Hella travels to Spain to determine whether she wants to marry David, he meets Giovanni, an Italian waiter at a gay bar. He moves into Giovanni's room, partly because of lack of money, but also primarily, I think, because he wants to be with Giovanni, right? However conflicted he feels about it. Later, Hella returns to Paris, and David is determined to start a new life with her, partly because he can't really accept his love with Giovanni, and he leaves Giovanni. Giovanni loses his job, falls on hard times, tries to beg for his old job back from Guillaume, a wealthy gay bar owner. When Guillaume propositions him sexually, I've lost my place, Giovanni becomes enraged and strangles him. The novel ends with Hella leaving David to return to America, Giovanni executed by guillotine for the murder, and David alone. So the novel was written with perspectives of two Davids, one reflecting back, and also David in the moment, in deep shame about his sexual attraction to men. So Baldwin wrote this novel in 1955 at the time of McCarthyism, when homosexuality was still outlawed, and years before Stonewall. When he shared his novel with his publishers, they advised him to burn it, as they believed it would destroy his career. It didn't. He persisted, and what we have today is an honest, brutal story of the impact of homophobia and how David internalized it. This is very telling when David is at a gay bar and he sees an effeminate man. The description is hard to read. He's so disgusted by the man, describing him as it, mummy, zombie. It walks on its toes, the flat hips make a dead, horrifying lasciviousness. It stank of powder and gardenia perfume. Since David believes homosexuality involves the loss of masculinity, he cannot abide it. The most shocking sentence to me is, his utter grotesqueness made me uneasy. Perhaps in the same way that the sight of monkeys eating their own excrement turns some people's stomachs. He had reduced this man to an animal eating shit. Baldwin doesn't shy away from the dark depths of homophobia, even though David isn't the most likable character, clearly. We still have compassion for him. Baldwin humanizes his struggle and his inability to love. Baldwin noted in his 1949 essay, Preservation of Innocence, a novel incessantly demands the presence and passion of human beings who cannot even be labeled. Once the novelist has created a human being, he He has shattered a label, and in transcending the subject matter, is able, for the first time, to tell us something about it, and to reveal how profoundly all things involving humans interlock. So the story is not just about homophobia, but universal fears of falling in love. The humanization of characters make them real and hopefully prevent stereotyping and broad strokes in writing. The power of Giovanni's room partly resides in its ability to humanize David's attempts, although failed, at love and connection. Here lies the part of the answer for me about how to meaningfully write about larger issues in a personal, detailed way. We cannot let our frustrations and self-righteous anger about a belief override the humanity of all people. This brings me to my creative work for my thesis. As Pam Houston has said, 86% of fiction work is informed by actual events, my personal lives, and this is true for me too. I think mine's more in the high 90s, to be honest. I'm an early writer, baby writer. So the landscape of South Africa during apartheid, however, like I said before, it loomed too large. But I wanted to capture the air of fear, and so I followed up with Chris's suggestion about the family. As many of us do, I have family issues. When I was 9, my mother tried to kill me by trying to strangle me because she believed my room was messy. It wasn't. Although I remembered the event throughout my life, I didn't think much of it, neither good or bad. I was kind of numb about it, really. Until my aunt's funeral in 1999, when Francina, my previous maid, it's weird to talk about maids, but there it is, South Africa, right? Who also worked for my aunt, shared some information with me. She said that she had ran into the room and saw my mother strangling me and tried to pull my mother's fingers up, from my throat, but it was hard because my mother wouldn't stop. I didn't go to the hospital, nobody talked about it. It's interesting how trauma works, how it kind of warps time. It changes how we see things and what we believe about them. The fact that I waited out of 19 years before thinking it was a problem. Traumas also can be funny. My mother died on my 15th birthday, so we didn't get to talk about this event or other issues while she was still alive. Since psyche is a trip and memory is wobbly, writing about stuff in an orderly way didn't make sense to me. So short stories or novel chapters were challenging for me. I tried for several semesters and then gave up. I took a semester off to decide what I needed to do. I reflected on the amorphous nature of memory. I started writing fragments and flash fiction because it better reflected my memory. I also wrote some texts in first person and others in third, depending on the feeling. There's also some fabulism in there because memory is in some ways unreal and mythological in nature. It affects what we believe about ourselves and the world. One of the epigraphs I included at the beginning of my work is, "The past is a foreign country. They do things differently there," which is by L.P. Hartley from the novel The Go-Between. The Go-Between, written in 1953, I must have loved the 50s, I don't know. It's a strange country, the past, ephemeral. So I was forced to read The Go-Between in Standard 9, which is equivalent to your junior year of high school. I can't say that I love the writing, but I recognize myself in the main character, Leo Colston, who finds his diary from when he was 13 years old in 1900. Very Victorian English, right? So Leo felt that he was a messenger to the gods, a go-between between the gardener and the rich sister of his friend during the hot summer, helping to foster their clandestine relationships by sharing letters. It doesn't end well for any of them, somebody dies. But for Leo, he doesn't die, but his dream dies, and he ends up as being a librarian instead of a writer. So much love to librarians, but this wasn't his dream, right? At the time, I wanted to be a writer too, but I didn't think it was possible. I couldn't imagine writing about my family, these mythological, daunting creatures. But that belief isn't necessarily true either. What we allow ourselves to write about it, the stories we tell ourselves. So I decided to write from different perspectives, informed by Pete Orner's Esther Stories, suggested by Chris, on the first day of my first MFA workshop. writes a multitude of flash fiction short pieces, and then a longer piece about a Jewish family in the 1950s. I decided to divide my writing into 4 sections. The first is about Lee, the daughter, and her perspective. And then the second is regarding Karen, her aunt who is dying. She comes back later on as an adult to see her aunt. The third is about Val, the mom, from her perspective. And the final section is called Requiem, about death, although really the whole book is wrapped in death. It was extremely difficult to write from Val, essentially my mother's perspective. I had to guess what her internal thoughts were and how she dealt with the breast cancer diagnosis. I also had to imagine how she responded to other people. It was exhausting to write this to deadline during the MFA. I kept asking myself why I had chosen the most difficult subject. Turns out I couldn't write about anything else. I had to write about this. In the past, I used to joke flippantly that I didn't need to buy a Mother's Day card or present because my mother was dead. It was just me being angry and wary, and I was tired of being angry. So Val's section allowed me to write about this ordinary woman, very ordinary woman, overwhelmed with limited coping skills, doing the best she could. I still hold my mother responsible for her actions, but I'm no longer angry with her. That is important. There are no monsters here. Writing from my mother's perspective shifted my beliefs about her so I could be free enough. It's not like it's all wrapped up, but free enough. That wasn't my original plan when I started the MFA, but it makes the MFA so worthwhile to me. I can now sit with my mother, and I was given one of the greatest gifts in some fashion to talk to her even after death. I'm not sure what I'll do with this work. Maybe it'll sit in a drawer, or maybe it'll be a movie or play, maybe it'll be published, or not. I thought about writing a non-fiction book about belief, therefore the title, that's right, informed by psychology and philosophy. And I think that story tells this best because, like Baldwin suggested, it humanizes the situation. And I need this right now. I never thought I would feel as I did during apartheid, like my body and mind would be poisoned by the world around me. Although I imagine it would feel more constant for people of color. Just how shitty it feels right now. Sorry, I'm swearing. I want to understand how people end up doing terrible things on a national level, born of racism, sexism, transphobia, and other hates. How can we possibly understand this so it doesn't keep happening again? The interesting perspective I had during apartheid time was that I wasn't the victim and I wasn't the primary perpetrator. I nonetheless received privileges as a white child. Similarly, as a white person in America, even if I am supposedly woke, I receive privileges and I'm a bystander, a witness. And there's a danger about writing about big issues as an angelic, liberal white person and not looking at the dynamics at play. As Deborah suggested in the craft talk regarding traumatic events, everyone in the scene has some part to play. So maybe I'll write about that, I don't know, where I stand now in America. I want to end by unpacking my belief about this MFA program and the mythology of what a professional writer looks like. I only started writing 2 years before I applied for grad school. It happened that way because I thought I could not write anything about my family until they were all dead, so like never. They all outlived me. I don't know. My partner at the time attended the MFA program here, and to assist them, hey Donnie. I was able to view craft talks and also to determine the workload. I needed to know that I could do it with my work schedule, so I only applied for this program, no others. But I still considered myself a baby writer. I wasn't sure of myself, and this meant I didn't know what I wanted to do, and this led to a lot of uncertainty. Ultimately, I realized that I need to be much more revolutionary and play a lot more. When I talked to Kelly about my uncertainty, she reminded me that this degree is just a point along the road of my writing, that she would like to see me writing 10 years from now. So my only goals for this term was be playful and graduate. So I played with fragments and fabulism, and I'm beginning to love writing again. For those still in the program, be as playful, experimental, and as radical as you can be. Now's the time with the added support and feedback. Don't let the belief of what a good writer get you down. Chris once said this in our chats, and kind of inferred to in this craft work, writing isn't magic. I believe it. It isn't a gift bestowed by the gods. We can all write well if we apply ourselves and also ask ourselves truly what we do need to write. If it was our last work. Kwame encouraged us to unpack our part of the cosmos that hasn't been explored, and to do it so with like ambition and passion and responsibility. Push the boundary. So I used some of my time for just talking to you, but now I'm going to read my piece. And the piece I'm going to read is from Val's section. Just a normal, ordinary woman, right? And I can't read all of it because of time, but the landscape is apartheid South Africa in Johannesburg in the early 80s. Val is in her mid-30s. Stephen is Val's husband, same age. Lee and Evan are the kids, 9 and 10 years old. Okay. It's called Mother and Daughter. Everything had to go across both breasts. They couldn't leave anything for the cancer, like crumbs for ants. It had spread to the right lymph node, so that went too in the muscle. Val hadn't really listened to Dr. Solash when he gave the technical details. All she knew was that she looked like a little Italian boy, flat-chested, 4'9". Once a day, Val had to insert a full arm into a bright yellow inflatable cylinder with navy stripes. It was ugly in a cheerful way. It looked like a Lido the kids would use in the pool. When they first unpacked it, Evan laughed and called it the Yellow Submarine. He was usually such a serious boy. She would lie there as it pressed down on her arm for an hour, doing the work of her lymph nodes and muscles, so that the blood and other stuff moved where it needed to. The rest of the time, there was the hideous compression sleeve to compensate for her missing muscles. Val had become used to the constraint, the pressure of the dark beige sleeve on her right arm. She hated the color. It always looked dirty, even when it was clean, and it clung to her in a way that seemed sticky, even when it wasn't. She could never remember the name the doctor gave it, so she called it that damn thing. It was something that urged her blood not to be stagnant, to return from the periphery of her fingers to her body, to move the blood back. Stephen used to tell her that she had the best breasts he had ever seen, full and just the right size. Her body didn't seem to miss her breasts as much as her muscles. They were essential, and all day, every day, the gauze was meant to replace them. Her arm was always aching, like it had a headache that wouldn't go away. The ache made it so that she just wanted to move out of her body, forget. Months after the surgery, the scars had healed, but the pain continued to radiate. Val became attached to her room. Friends met her there as she lay in bed in her jeans and t-shirt. The children made her and others Nescafe coffee. Lee loved bringing the coffee and the tennis biscuits, careful not to spill anything. They hadn't told Lee about the cancer. She was too young, not even 10. Minor surgery, Val said, locking the door where she showered. Lee would pull on the door, shaking it and asking why it was locked. Before, Lee used to sit on the covered toilet seat and chat with Val while she showered. They told Evan about the cancer because he was a year older and more mature. He liked being Mommy's little helper. Every day, he brought out the yellow deflated thing and set up the pump. This Sunday, she hadn't touched her coffee. She willed herself upright, duvet covering up to her neck. It was getting colder, and she didn't want to go to Sunday brunch with the family. She wanted to stay put, but it wasn't an option to stay home. The cupboard was full of stuff that she had worn before, but now seemed like someone else's clothes from a different life. She dragged herself out of bed and locked the bedroom door. She got back in bed and hid under the covers for another few minutes. Stephen called out from the kitchen asking what she was doing, and she knew he would come and check on her. She shouted, "Getting ready!" Her mother would wonder why she didn't make an effort, and she wasn't ready to tell her yet. She picked up the coffee cup. She sipped and stared at her cupboard blankly for a few moments. She could do this. The brown pants that wouldn't fall off would work. She liked the cream silk shirt that was loose, and it went well with the cashmere cardigan her mother gave her as a birthday gift. Her brown leather boots from Spain, the small heel, would match her bag. She took the gauze compression sleeve off so that mother wouldn't see it. Instead of being a relief, a pause from the pressure, her arm pulsed more. Maybe it would be okay. "I'll meet you at the car," she called out. She just didn't have the energy to help with anything. She walked outside into the chill air and got into the passenger seat, even though she was a better driver than Stephen. Driving seemed out of the question today. She adjusted her seat back and closed her eyes, even just for a minute, but her right arm throbbed. She rubbed and patted it like she was comforting a baby. The softness of the cashmere cardigan was soothing. The winter sun, trapped in the car, warmed her. She wasn't sure how much time had passed. The back door opened and the pressure in the car changed as the air escaped. Good noise. Val opened her eyes and turned around. Lee was climbing into the back seat wearing her favorite turquoise shorts and shirt with a parrot. Put something warmer on, she said. Why? Lee said. She always questioned everything. You'll be colder later, just go do it. Lee had got into the habit of sticking her bottom lip out when she didn't like something, but she knew not to argue. And pull that lip in, or you're going to trip over it. Lee slid out of the car and went back inside, dragging her feet as she went. Woo, this thing just moved. Trying to catch him. Hold on, I misaligned. Lee slid out of the car and went back inside, dragging her feet as she went, a silent protest. Val looked at her watch. If they didn't leave soon, they would be late for Sunday brunch, and her mother would notice. One of the puppies ran out of the front door with Evan behind, trying to catch him. Stephen had brought home twin puppies a few weeks before, Dollar and Gambit, Rottweiler mixes, maybe for the kids. The puppy had to be Gambit because he was a little bit thinner and faster than his brother, and Evan couldn't catch him running around the front yard. The puppy thought it was a game. Evan looked worried, such a little old man. He reminded her of her father, so meticulous, quiet, thoughtful. She considered getting out of the car to get everyone ready and then changed her mind. She had just enough energy to sit in the car and try to ignore her painful arm. Her fingers were beginning to swell. She could not take off her wedding ring. Her mother would be sure to see. But she could remove her other gold rings. She struggled to pull each one off, partly because her left hand wasn't as strong as the affected right. She adjusted her seat, and the back of her fake breast rubbed against her scars and bounced a little. She had worn her bra tight and buttoned up her shirt to the top and closed her cardigan so no one could tell that her breasts were not real. There were weighted bags filled with something like sand, better than the spongy feeling ones that were stiff. Still, they felt like ballast, keeping her from going anywhere. Stephen came out and barked at Evan to get the dog inside. Evan began to explain and then lowered his head. The puppy saw the game was over and walked towards him. Evan picked him up by his chest, his long legs dangling, and went inside. Val hadn't noticed until then that Stephen was carrying a large block of cheese under his right arm. "Do they really need all that cheese?" she asked. "I promised next time we would bring them some. I told you there were some perks for working at the National Dairy," he said as he grinned, slight gap between his teeth. Lee and him both. Those gaps made them look ready for mischief. Should Mom really be eating cheese with a heart condition? "Come on, Val," he said. "She's allowed to enjoy things." Lee walked to the car, and somehow she had dressed herself appropriately with jeans, a t-shirt, and red cardigan, but her cardigan was misbuttoned and her t-shirt wasn't tucked in. Val decided to ignore the messiness. Evan followed behind and closed the front door. He looked for her and smiled with that little worried face. Maybe she shouldn't have told him. He often looked at her as if he was about to hear bad news. The kids settled in the back, Lee with a book she had left in the car. Evan always had his Rubik's Cube in his pocket so he could solve this puzzle eventually. They took the old Pretoria Highway from Joburg because it avoided going through most of the city to get to Capital Park. Went past the hard, square Pretoria Central Prison with slivers for windows. She had read that they hung men there, up to 7 at a time. She looked away from the prison as they drove past. It seemed discordant that she was fighting to live and 7 people could go in a minute. They weren't the black political prisoners who were at Robben Island. They were probably murderers, bad men. The kids squealed in the back that an overpass was coming. "No, you're not doing headstands," she turned and warned them. They weren't listening. They were too giddy with excitement. She knew she couldn't stop there. They turned and placed their heads on the seat, hands next to their heads, and within the small confines of the car, tried to lift their legs without much success, and they fell over. It was absurd. Thankfully, their legs weren't long enough to kick Stephen while he was driving. They had done headstands on their corduroy twin chairs at home, and then it was in the car. It had happened in the last few months when she didn't have the energy and Stephen hadn't stopped them. Now it was tradition, every overpass, she sighed. At some point it would have to end. For now, she didn't want to be the one saying no. It took 45 minutes to travel from the neighborhood to Capitol Park. Stephen popped the Hooked on Classics tape in, and the kids started calling out the name of composers and the piece. And there was Puccini's Tosca. She didn't want to listen to it. There was something about classical music, the swell, the emotion that made her want to cry. The kids would see. She reached out with a good hand and popped the tape out. I want to guess the next composer, Ellen whined. Guess these ones instead. It took a moment for her to find Radio 5 with its pop beats. She even smiled when Lee crooned from the backseat to Endless Love. This was easier. They had driven this way hundreds of times, but this time everything seemed weighted. Capitol Park felt dry, especially in the winter. Lawns were scorched yellow, and everything seemed more brown. Her parents' house were beyond a copy with no growth on it, blocking what came after. Beyond that, there was Pretoria Zoo on the right. The kids would always ask if they could go, even if she had taken them there recently. They never tired of the long walks past the rhino pit. The animal looked like a modified tank, stationary, with nowhere to go. Thank you. So let me just say, before I introduce Mel, that what she asked me to do for the intro is a little unusual, and it's completely of her making, not mine. All right, it's very brief. Okay, you have to see what I do. Mel makes beautiful babies. That's funny, right?
I told them jazz hands, and they looked at me like I was insane. And